This will put trans people at risk of violence.
Trump said there are only two genders, and the Wi-Fi password movement is not coping well. ACLU transgender activist and lawyer Chase Strangio went on Democracy Now!, a left-wing network, and kind of crashed out over Trump's executive order, stating that there are only two sexes and sex cannot be changed. We're gonna take a look and buckle up, because this interview is a real doozy.
And one executive order also includes a directive that forces the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to submit a policy for, quote, protecting women seeking single-sex rape shelters. Can you talk about this potentially putting trans people at risk?
Yeah, so there are many, many instructions in this one executive order, including this directive to HUD to issue proposed regulations to, in essence, exclude trans people from various forms of shelter system under the auspices that a trans person is an inherent threat to non-transgender women. Obviously, that just enhances the risk that transgender people face in society if we are deemed as a threat to others simply by existing. And the order also includes directions to, for example, the Secretary of State and Department of Homeland Security to possibly revoke the passports of transgender people because those passports do not reflect this quote unquote biological reality that sex is only binary at the time of conception.
There's no quote unquote reality. That's just the reality, babe. And yeah, if somebody's passport has an X on it, it should be revoked, and then they can get a new one that is accurate. It is actually important to have accurate statements of biological sex on government documents. That's not a hate crime, babe. It's a correction of an insane policy by the last administration. Now, the main point here, Chase and this activist journalist on Democracy Now! Suggest that women are fundamentally unreasonable and bigoted if they want, for example, sex-segregated rape shelters. Yeah. No. If women are seeking a space like that, it is because, in most cases, they have experienced deep trauma at the hands of a man. And it's not crazy for them to want to exclude biological males from those spaces. It actually makes a lot of sense, because y'all throw this word around like candy on Halloween, but in this one case it's actually appropriate. That might be triggering for them. So trans people who need those kinds of services might need to go to a different space. And that's okay. That's not the end of the world if they have to go to a different third space shelter that is for trans folks, gender non-conforming people, that is open to all, whatever. But if some women want women-only spaces to process some of the most horrific trauma imaginable, and you try to take that away from them and suggest that that makes them bigots or that makes you unsafe, you're the bad guy. You're the one being unreasonable and close-minded. And it's that kind of extreme advocacy that's just so out of touch and so radical that has really, I think, prompted this backsliding in support for trans rights among the public. You're playing yourself, babe. I don't know what to tell you. You're playing yourself. But this interview somehow got worse.
We know that people rely on accurate identification to move freely through the country and around the world. This will put trans people at risk of violence. It means every time you have an encounter with the government, the likelihood that you will be outed is significantly increased. And then with that outing comes the risk of discrimination, harassment, and potentially violence. So trans people are bracing themselves for a lot of negative outcomes here, not just symbolic, but really material ones. I know the community is scared. I know people are confused. And in this chaos, we just have to come together and build all of the forms of resistance that we know how to. But it is scary and it is alarming to read those executive orders last night.
Oh, boy. I mean, there's something kind of Orwellian about the person who wants documents to say people's sex are the opposite of what their sex is, complaining that documents are no longer going to be accurate. No, they actually are going to be accurate now. That's the point. And I just don't get what Chase is saying about how this is going to put trans people at risk of danger or something. So is the suggestion here that when you're traveling internationally as Chase Strangio, who appears as a trans man, not quite passing as a man, especially with the voice, but appears more masculine and has facial hair in many ways, and you go up to the passport officer and they open up your passport and it correctly notes that you're female. Now, look, maybe there should be some sort of marker you can get for like transgender recognition in addition to that, but your sex is female and it's going to accurately state that on your documents now, that the passport officer is going to see that and assault you and hurt you or something. That's not a thing. I'm struggling to think of the situation in which showing a government official correct documentation of your sex will result in a trans person being beat up or harmed, like Chase is saying. And to be clear, if that happens, that official should be prosecuted. You can't assault people because of what their papers say. That's insane. But I just don't think that's a thing. And I feel like this is insane alarmism and hyperbole. And I'm a little bit worried about what Chase means by all means of resistance, because some of this trans activist crowd gets a little crazy when it comes to their resistance. So it slightly frightens me. And I would have loved the host there to ask Chase, what do you mean by resistance exactly? Because hopefully Chase just means peaceful protesting, lawsuits, other things within the bounds of kind of normal democratic society. But with some of these trans activists, that's not what they mean. And I would have appreciated some clarity on that. But look, I think this interview for me really showed how out of touch trans activists are at the mainstream LGBT activist organizations and the left-wing organizations like the ACLU. And I think if the trans community, for which I count friends that belong to it and who I really do want to have freedom and dignity like anyone else, if they want to have public acceptance in the long run, they need to present a much more reasonable and moderate face to the public than whatever the heck we just saw. Because the American public's never going to be on board with all that nonsense. I'm sorry, they're just not. But what do you guys think? Do you support Trump's executive order on the two sexes, or are you also deeply traumatized and unsafe by it? Let me know in the comments. I do take the time to read the comment section, and I always love hearing what you guys have to say. Plus, make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit that like button while you're at it.